The war began without warning, and no one understood why the alien fleet had chosen Earth as their target. Their ships appeared like shadows swallowing the stars, and every human soldier was called to fight for survival. Among them was a young soldier named Daniel, who never thought he would stand before an alien queen one day. The skies above Earth burned red with fire as the alien bombardments rained down. Entire cities shook under the weight of destruction, and yet humanity did not surrender. Daniel fought on the front lines, his rifle clutched tight, his heart filled with fear but also with determination. He believed that if he died, his death would at least buy time for others to live. The aliens were powerful, but they had underestimated human resilience. Daniel led a small squad through the ruins of a broken city, dodging falling towers and enemy drones. He never sought glory, only survival, but fate had different plans. During a sudden counterattack, he and his squad cornered a group of alien elites, and in that chaos, he saved the life of someone he could never have imagined saving: the alien queen herself had been among the warriors in disguise. Her people were proud and ruthless, but she had walked the battlefield to witness humanity's strength. When enemy fire trapped her beneath shattered steel, Daniel ignored his fear and rushed to pull her free. He thought she would kill him, but instead, she looked at him with strange respect. Captured and taken aboard her flagship, Daniel expected torture or execution. The queen, tall and radiant with eyes that glowed like molten silver, studied him with curiosity. She asked why a fragile human would risk his life for someone he should call his enemy. His answer was simple: because life was worth saving, even if it belonged to one who sought his destruction. Her court gasped at his words, but the queen's lips curved in a faint smile. She declared before her council that the human had earned a reward greater than gold or freedom. She would grant him 3 wishes, 3 gifts that could reshape his fate. The chamber fell silent as her voice echoed with power, and Daniel realized he stood at the edge of something far greater than war. He thought carefully, his heart pounding. Any soldier might have asked for power, weapons, or Earth safety. But Daniel's first wish was not for himself, nor even for his planet. He looked straight into the queen's eyes and spoke words that stunned the entire court. He asked that she spare every innocent life on Earth: women, children, the weak, and unarmed. He asked that the war touch only those who chose to fight. The queen froze, her expression unreadable. No one had expected such a request, not even her council. Many aliens had imagined the human would beg for his own safety or demand riches. But Daniel had placed humanity's weakest above himself. The queen's eyes narrowed, then widened, and for the first time in centuries, her warriors saw her hesitate. Her court erupted in whispers, anger, and disbelief. Some called the human foolish. Others warned the queen that such a promise would weaken their campaign. But the queen silenced them with a single gesture. She turned back to Daniel and declared that his wish was granted. No innocent would be harmed by her hand or her armies, and her oath was bound in blood. Daniel felt relief wash over him, but also fear. He had used his first wish for others, but 2 more remained. The queen leaned closer, her voice soft yet carrying the weight of entire empires. She told him to choose wisely, for each wish would shape not only his fate, but the fate of galaxies. And Daniel realized that what he had begun was not just a negotiation with power, but a test of what it truly meant to be human. Daniel could not sleep that night on the alien flagship. His mind replayed the queen's words again and again. She had granted his first wish, and her armies would no longer slaughter Earth civilians. It was a miracle, but it also felt like a heavy weight. He had 2 wishes left, and every choice could change the destiny of not just Earth but the galaxy. The alien queen, named Saravia, was unlike any ruler he had read about in history books. She was both terrifying and graceful, with a voice that could silence entire halls. Her people treated her with fear, not love. Yet when she looked at Daniel, it was with something strange in her eyes, something close to curiosity. She had promised him 3 wishes, but he began to realize that to her, this was also an experiment. Word of his first wish spread quickly across the alien fleet. Soldiers and officers whispered about the human who valued children and mothers over himself. Some called him weak, others called him dangerous. To them, mercy was a weakness, but to Daniel it was strength. He had seen too much death already. If he could stop even a part of it, then his life was worth the risk. When morning came, Sarathia summoned him again to her throne chamber. The walls were covered in glowing runes, and alien guards stood like statues with their long spears. Daniel walked with steady steps, though his heart was racing. He knew she would demand his second wish soon. And this time, it would be harder than the first. The queen asked him if he would use his second wish for weapons, for soldiers, or for victory. Her lips curved into a smile, as if she already knew what his answer might be. Daniel stood silent for a long moment, then spoke in a calm voice. He said he wanted something different. He wished for knowledge. He wanted to understand her people, their history, and why they had come to wage war against humanity. The chamber erupted again with outrage. Many shouted that a human should never know the secrets of their kind. But Sarathia raised her hand, and silence fell instantly. She studied Daniel with sharp eyes, as if weighing the meaning behind his words. Knowledge was more dangerous than weapons. Knowledge could change loyalties and reveal weaknesses. She asked him why he wanted this, and he answered simply because understanding was the only path to peace. For the first time, the queen leaned back and did not answer immediately. She seemed caught between anger and intrigue. Slowly, she rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. The guards shifted. Nervously, unused to seeing their queen walk close to a prisoner. She stopped only a few feet away and whispered that knowledge was a dangerous gift. Once given, it could not be taken back. Still, a promise was a promise, and she had sworn by her throne. That night, the alien queen kept her word. She brought Daniel into a chamber filled with ancient crystals that glowed with memory. Each one contained fragments of history, written not on paper, but in light and sound. When he touched one, he saw visions of alien wars, ancient empires, and the rise of Sarathia's dynasty. He saw how her people had been forged in fire, their culture built on conquest and survival. And he saw their fear, the fear of extinction, that drove them to strike first at Earth. Daniel's breath caught as the truth unfolded. Humanity had frightened them. It was not greed alone that brought their fleets, but fear of what humans might become. In their eyes, humans were a storm not yet risen, a power that could one day eclipse their empire. Daniel realized then that the war was not only about land or resources. It was about destiny itself. When the visions faded, Daniel stood trembling. The queen's voice echoed in the chamber, asking if he understood now. He nodded slowly, but in his heart he felt something deeper: rage at the suffering caused by fear, and sorrow that peace had been sacrificed to paranoia. He had used his second wish, and it had given him clarity. Now only one wish remained, and he knew it would be the most important of all. Daniel's second wish had opened a door he could never close again. The memories of Sarathia's people haunted his thoughts, their fear of humanity carved into his mind. He lay awake in the small chamber given to him on the flagship, staring at the strange lights that pulsed like living stars on the ceiling. Knowledge was heavier than chains, and now he carried it alone. He thought about his fellow soldiers back on Earth. They were still fighting, still bleeding while he stood in the heart of the enemy's empire. Would they call him a traitor if they knew he had asked for the enemy's history instead of weapons? Would they understand that he sought peace, not surrender? His chest tightened with doubt, but deep down he knew this was the path he had to walk. The next morning, Sarathia summoned him once more. Her throne room felt colder than before, the alien guards more watchful. She asked him if the knowledge had changed his view of her people. Daniel looked straight at her and answered that it had, but not in the way she expected. He told her that he pitied them because fear had ruled their choices for centuries. The Queen's lips curved, but it was not a smile. It was something sharper, a trace of amusement mixed with challenge. She told him pity was dangerous because pity often led to arrogance. Her people did not want pity. They wanted respect or fear. She asked him then if his final wish would be pity as well, or something greater. The hall fell silent as her voice echoed. Daniel hesitated. He had two choices now. He could use his third wish for Earth to demand safety, weapons, or even victory. Or he could use it for something that would go beyond war, something that could change the fate of both their species. His hands trembled, and he clenched them to hide his fear. He had to choose wisely, for this would define everything that followed. Before he could answer, alarms blared through the flagship. The floor shook beneath them, and alien officers rushed into the chamber. Reports filled the air. The humans had launched a counterstrike. Fleets of Earth's last surviving warships were attacking the alien armada in orbit. Sarathia's guards raised their weapons, expecting betrayal from Daniel, but he stood still, his eyes wide with shock. The war was crashing down around them. Faster than he had expected, Sarathia rose from her throne with fury in her eyes. She ordered her commanders to prepare for battle and crush the human fleet. Her voice was sharp, filled with power, and her people obeyed instantly. Yet when she turned back to Daniel, she saw something she had not expected. He looked at her not with fear, but with resolve. He told her that his third wish must be spoken now, before more blood was spilled. The Queen narrowed her eyes, but she nodded. A promise was a promise. She demanded to hear his final wish. Daniel's chest burned as he gathered his courage. He spoke with a voice that echoed across the hall. He wished for an end to the war itself, not through victory of one side over the other, but through a truce bound by her power and his humanity together. Gasps shook the chamber. Officers cried out in outrage. Some even raised their weapons at him, calling the wish madness. But Sarathia lifted her hand, silencing them. Her gaze bore into Daniel, piercing deep into his soul. She asked him if he understood what he was asking. A truce meant weakness to her people. It meant breaking traditions that had lasted for generations. Yet she also saw the fire in his eyes. He did not speak for himself alone. He spoke for all of Earth. For a long moment, no one breathed. The Queen's silver eyes shone like blades of light. She studied him as though she could see every memory, every fear, and every hope inside him. At last she whispered that she would consider his wish. But she warned him that to grant it, he would have to prove humanity was worthy of such a gift. His third wish had been spoken, but its price was yet to be tested. Asterisk. The Queen's words lingered in the air, like a blade held over Daniel's head. She had not refused his final wish, but neither had she accepted it. To the alien court, his demand for peace sounded like rebellion against everything they believed. Yet Sarathia's eyes had not turned away. She wanted proof, and proof meant trial. Daniel was escorted to a training ground deep within the flagship. The floor was made of black stone that pulsed with strange energy. Around the arena, alien soldiers gathered, their armor glinting in the harsh light. Some shouted for his death. Others watched with quiet interest, eager to see what a human could truly do. Daniel stood in the center, unarmed, and wondered if this was the price of his wish. Sarathia appeared above the arena on a high balcony. Her cloak shimmered like liquid silver, and her voice carried across the chamber without effort. She declared that if the human wanted a truce, he would have to show the strength of his kind, not just with weapons, but with heart. He would face her chosen champions, and only then would she judge whether humanity deserved peace. The first challenger stepped forward. a towering alien warrior with skin like stone and eyes burning with rage. He carried a massive blade that hummed with energy, each swing capable of tearing through steel. Daniel's heart pounded, but he remembered his training. He moved with speed instead of strength, dodging strikes and using his enemy's weight against him. It was not easy, but after a brutal exchange, he forced the warrior to yield. The crowd roared with mixed fury and respect. Some spat curses, others nodded in silence. Saradhya did not move, her expression unreadable. She raised her hand, and another challenger entered the arena. This one was smaller, quicker, with twin daggers that flashed like lightning. The fight was faster, sharper, testing Daniel's reflexes more than his endurance. Cuts burned across his arms, but he did not fall. With a desperate counter, he disarmed the alien and stood victorious again. Blood dripped from his wounds, and his muscles screamed with exhaustion. Still, Daniel stood tall. He looked up at the queen's balcony, and for the first time, he saw something in her gaze that was not cold judgment. It was recognition, yet the test was not over. A third challenger stepped forward, one unlike the others. This warrior carried no weapon at all, only his fists, and his stance was calm like a storm waiting to break. The final duel was the hardest. Every strike Daniel threw was met with crushing counters. His ribs ached, his vision blurred, and the alien's fists hammered him like iron. But inside him burned something the aliens could not measure. The memory of Earth, of its children, of its endless skies. He refused to fall. With the last of his strength, he drove the warrior back and forced him to his knees. The arena fell silent at the sight. Saradhya rose slowly, her cloak rippling behind her. Her warriors waited for her judgment, their faces hard with disbelief. She looked down at Daniel, his body broken but his spirit unyielding. And then, for the first time in generations, the alien queen extended her hand toward a human. She declared that his courage had proven something her people had long forgotten. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was worthy of respect. The court erupted in chaos. Some shouted that the queen had been bewitched. Others argued that her word was law. Daniel could barely stand, but he heard her voice cut through the noise like thunder. She announced that his third wish would not be denied. She would consider peace. Yet she warned that peace could not come from one duel alone. It would require sacrifice, and not just from him. Daniel's vision blurred, but his heart swelled. He had survived the trial, but the war was not over. His wish had planted a seed, and now it had to grow. Whether it would flourish or be crushed under blood and fire was still unknown. But one thing was certain, he had changed the course of history, and Saradhya knew it as well as he did. Daniel was carried from the arena with his body bruised and torn, yet his spirit was unbroken. Alien healers used their strange light to mend his wounds, though the scars of battle remained. He lay on the metal bed of the infirmary, staring at the ceiling, knowing he had survived the queen's test. But survival was not victory. His third wish had been spoken, and now its weight pressed harder than ever. Saradhya visited him the next day, her presence filling the chamber like a storm. Entering a quiet sky, she dismissed the healers with a flick of her hand and stood beside his bed. Her silver eyes studied him with a depth that made him uneasy. She told him that his strength had impressed her, but strength alone could not build peace. If he truly wanted the war to end, he would have to prove that humans and her people could stand side by side, not as enemies but as allies. Daniel pushed himself up despite the pain in his ribs. He asked her what she meant, and her lips curved slightly. She explained that one man's courage was not enough. He would have to walk among her people, face their hatred, and still show the spirit he had shown in the arena. Only then could she hope to convince her council that peace with humanity was possible. It was not a reward, it was a trial greater than combat. He agreed, though fear stirred within him. The following days were filled with challenges unlike any battle. He was taken into the alien city that lived within the flagship, a place of towering spires and glowing bridges. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him. Some glared with hatred, others with suspicion. Children pointed at him, whispering words he could not understand. To them, he was the enemy who had dared to stand before their queen, yet Daniel did not falter. He spoke with merchants, helped lift heavy crates in the docks, and even aided a group of young workers struggling to fix a broken energy conduit. At first they refused his help, but when he solved the problem with his human ingenuity, their expressions shifted from scorn to surprise. Word began to spread that the human was not as fragile as they believed. Still, not everyone was willing to accept him. One evening, as he returned to his quarters, a group of alien soldiers cornered him. They accused him of tricking their queen and betraying their people. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light as they moved closer. Daniel's heart raced, but he did not raise his fists. Instead, he spoke firmly, saying he sought no throne, no power, only a chance for peace. His calmness disarmed them more than any weapon could. When Sarathia heard of this, she summoned him again. She questioned him sharply, asking if he had feared for his life. He admitted he had, but he told her that fear was a part of humanity, just as it was for her kind. The difference was that humans did not let fear rule them. They fought, they endured, and they hoped. Her gaze softened at his words, though she did not let her court see it. To them, she remained the untouchable queen. But Daniel saw the flicker of respect in her eyes. As the days passed, something began to change. Small groups of aliens greeted him without hatred. Workers offered him food. Soldiers nodded at him in silence, acknowledging the courage he had shown. Sarathia herself began to walk with him through the city, not as ruler to prisoner, but as equal to equal. Her people watched, and their whispers grew. They had never seen their queen share her time with anyone like this, especially a human. Daniel realized then that his final wish was not simply words spoken in a throne room. It was a seed planted in the hearts of those who had once seen humanity as only an enemy. Now that seed was sprouting, fragile yet real. But he also knew seeds could be crushed before they grew tall. The galaxy was vast, and not everyone would welcome peace. Still, he had begun something that could not easily be undone. Asterisk. The whispers in the alien city soon reached the ears of Sarathia's council. Many of them feared the influence Daniel was gaining. They argued that the queen was being deceived, that humanity's kindness was nothing but a mask. In the council chamber, voices rose in anger, demanding that the human be cast out or executed. Yet Sarathia silenced them with a single glance. She reminded them of her oath. The human had made his wish, and she would not break her word. Daniel stood outside the chamber, knowing his fate was being debated by those who saw him only as a threat. He clenched his fists, but he did not let fear break him. He had walked among their people, shown his strength and his compassion, yet suspicion remained. Peace was a fragile seed, and some wished to tear it from the soil before it could grow. When the council emerged, their faces were grim. Sarathia announced that Daniel's trial was not over. If peace was to be considered, he would have to face one final test, not with fists or weapons, but with words. The council demanded that he speak before the people of the flagship, before thousands who still saw humanity as an enemy. Only then would they decide if his wish had any worth. The day of the gathering came. The great plaza within the flagship glowed with crystal lights, casting long shadows across the assembled crowd. Alien banners rippled above, symbols of power and conquest. Daniel stood on a raised platform, his heart pounding as the voices of thousands rose in a storm of hatred and doubt. Sarathia watched from her throne, her face unreadable. The moment had come to speak not just as a soldier, but as a voice for his entire world. He began simply, with words about Earth. He told them of oceans that stretched beyond sight, of forests filled with life, of skies that burned with color when the sun set. He spoke of mothers protecting children, of farmers working fields, of teachers passing knowledge. He told them that humanity was more than soldiers and weapons. Humanity was life, and life deserved to endure. The crowd murmured, some in disbelief, others in curiosity. Daniel's voice grew stronger. He told them he had seen their history, their fear of extinction. He did not deny their strength, nor their suffering. But he told them fear was not reason enough to destroy. Fear could be a chain or a guide, but it did not have to lead to endless war. He said that humanity too had once lived in fear, but they had chosen hope instead. A silence spread across the plaza. Thousands of eyes watched him, searching for weakness or lies. Daniel did not falter. He raised his voice and declared that he was not asking them to love humanity, nor to kneel before earth. He was asking only for the chance to stand beside them. Not as masters or slaves, not as conquerors or prey, but as equals who could face the future together. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a single alien in the crowd lowered his weapon. Another bowed his head. Slowly, voices rose, not in anger, but in thought. The tide was shifting. Sarathia's eyes gleamed as she watched her people hesitate, caught between old hatred and the spark of something new. Daniel's words had pierced the walls fear had built for centuries. The council members exchanged glances, unease written across their faces. Some still whispered against him, but they could not deny what they had witnessed. The queen rose from her throne and lifted her hand, silencing the plaza. Her voice carried across the crowd as she declared that humanity had been tested, and the human had spoken with both courage and truth. She would honor his final wish, but peace would not be given freely. It had to be built, stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice. Daniel bowed his head, exhaustion washing over him. His body had endured battles, and now his voice had endured judgment. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and doubt. But as he stood before the alien queen and her people, he knew something had changed. A bridge had been built where before there was only fire. And though the future was uncertain, it was no longer written in blood alone. The queen's declaration echoed through the plaza, but the struggle was far from finished. Peace had been spoken aloud, yet many still clung to fear and hate. The council fractured into factions, some demanding war, others uncertain, a few daring to hope. Daniel stood quietly as the voices rose, knowing that words alone could not silence centuries of blood. Change would demand more than speeches. It would demand action. Sarathia summoned Daniel privately that night. Her chamber was lit by soft silver flames, their glow casting shadows across the carved walls. She looked weary, though she did not show weakness before her people. She told him the council would resist her decision. Some were already plotting against her, whispering of betrayal, even planning her removal. For peace to live, she warned, they would have to fight not only the scars of the past, but the greed of the present. Daniel listened in silence, his thoughts heavy. He asked her why she still stood beside him when her own throne was at risk. Her answer was steady. She said he had reminded her of something she had buried long ago, the idea that a ruler could protect rather than conquer. He had risked everything for his people, and now she would risk everything for hers. But she warned him that peace would exact a cost neither of them could yet measure. The following days grew tense. Alien fleets moved restlessly across the stars as human ships fought to hold their ground. Rumors spread that factions within the alien empire were preparing to break from Sarathia's command. Daniel walked the city and saw unrest in the faces of its people. Some looked at him with respect, others with contempt. He knew that one spark could undo everything he and the queen had begun. Then came the attack. A group of alien extremists struck the city from within, detonating explosives in the lower districts. Towers crumbled, fires burned, and screams filled the air. Daniel rushed into the chaos, pulling survivors from rubble, carrying children to safety, and shielding the wounded with his own body. He fought through smoke and flame, not with a weapon, but with his bare hands and will. The people who once called him enemy now saw him bleed for them. When the fires finally dimmed, Saravia arrived among the ruins. She found Daniel covered in ash, his clothes torn, his hands raw from lifting debris. Around him, alien civilians wept and clung to their families, alive because of him. The queen looked into the eyes of her people and saw something shifting. Their fear of humanity cracked, replaced by a fragile spark of trust. Daniel had given more than words. He had given his strength to save those who once wished him dead. The council could no longer deny what they had witnessed. Still, many resisted. They claimed the human had manipulated the disaster for sympathy, or that peace would make them vulnerable. Saravia rose before them, her voice thunderous. She told them she had seen with her own eyes the truth. She declared that peace was not weakness but survival, and that Daniel had proven it with both blood and sacrifice. Her authority silenced even her fiercest critics. Though their hatred did not vanish, Daniel knew the struggle was not over. He lay awake at night, the memory of smoke still in his lungs, the screams still in his ears. Yet he also remembered the child who had smiled at him through tears, alive because he had not walked away. That memory fueled him, reminding him why he had made his third wish. The war could end, but only if they continued to fight for peace with the same fire they once gave to battle. Saravia came to him once more, her expression softer than ever. She told him that the road ahead would test them both beyond measure. Peace was no longer just his wish. It was her choice as well. Together, they would have to hold it against enemies on both sides. Daniel looked into her silver eyes and nodded. For the first time, he felt not like a prisoner, not like a supplicant, but like an ally standing beside a queen who had once been his enemy. The war that had once seemed endless now stood at a crossroads. Daniel had made his wishes, and the queen had kept her word. Yet peace was not a gift wrapped in silk. It was fragile, fought for with blood, tears, and the courage to face both enemies and allies who resisted change. On the flagship, banners of conquest still hung, but whispers of something new drifted through the halls. The whispers of peace. Saravia called Daniel to her council chamber one last time. The air was tense, the walls lined with her most trusted commanders. Some still glared at him, their pride unwilling to bend, but none dared to challenge openly. The queen rose from her throne, her silver cloak gleaming under the crystal lights, and spoke. She declared that by his wishes, the course of history had been altered. No longer would innocent blood fall by her order. No longer would the war continue without end. Her words struck like thunder, and silence followed. Daniel stood tall, his heart steady. He had faced their blades, their doubts, and their hatred. Now he faced the weight of his final victory. Yet, even as relief washed over him, he knew the battle for peace was never truly finished. There would always be voices that wanted war. There would always be hands that reached for blood. But today, he had given humanity and the galaxy something rare. A chance. The council, divided and bitter, yielded under the queen's command. They could not defy her authority, and they could not deny what had been witnessed. Daniel's actions had burned into memory. The image of a human saving alien children from fire, of standing against champions and refusing to kneel, of speaking not for himself but for his world, had become a story none could erase. Stories had power, and his had taken root in the hearts of many. When the decision was made, Saravia dismissed the council and walked to Daniel. Her eyes, bright as molten silver, softened as she stood before him. She told him that his wishes had reshaped her people as much as they had reshaped his fate. She had granted 3 gifts, but in truth, it was she who had been changed. A ruler who had once believed only in conquest now saw another path, lit by the courage of a single human soldier. Daniel bowed his head, though his voice was firm. He reminded her that peace was not his alone to keep. It would require her strength, her people's trust, and humanity's willingness to believe in something greater than fear. Saradhya agreed. She told him that his role was not finished. He would not return home as a prisoner or as a bargaining tool. He would return as the bridge between their worlds. Not as a conqueror, but as a messenger. The flagship descended toward Earth. Weeks later, human leaders gathered in awe and fear as the alien queen herself stepped onto their soil. Beside her walked Daniel, once a soldier, now something far greater. He spoke to his people, telling them what he had seen, what he had learned, and what he had fought for. Humanity listened, their doubts heavy, but their hope heavier still. For the first time, they saw not only war, but a chance to shape a new destiny. Saradhya stood before the leaders of Earth and swore her vow. Her armies would not strike at the innocent again. She spoke of unity, of survival, of strength found not in destruction, but in alliance. Her words carried the weight of her throne, but it was Daniel's presence that gave them truth. The human who had made 3 wishes had proven himself in the eyes of both his world and hers. And together, they had ended a war that once seemed unending. As the sun set on that day, Daniel looked at the horizon and felt the weight lift from his shoulders. His wishes had not given him riches or power. They had given him something greater. They had given him the chance to save lives, to change hearts, and to prove that humanity was worthy of standing among the stars. The war was over, but the story of peace was just beginning.